Hello doll friends, this is Michael Kanadas with the Grovian Doll Museum and Carmel Doll Shop. Today we are here with our good friend BelleAnne Curry, and we are commemorating a company that this year is turning 100 years old.
100 years.
And I think that in my research of doll companies from the 19th century to now, it seems that most companies have about a 35-year lifespan.
Oh,
so this is an incredible accomplishment.
Yes.
To have survived, and not only survived, but thrived. So I want you to tell the story of this amazing woman known as Madame Alexander.
Madame Alexander. This, I'm going to tell you what, when I was asked to help and pitch in talking about these gorgeous Madame Alexander dolls, I'm a little overwhelmed. It was a daunting task. I am coming again to speaking about these at a place of love. There are online, and at the end of the program, I'm hoping we list some of my personal favorite places where you can go online and listen and see some of the most beautiful examples of Alexanders and hear experts, of which I don't consider myself on this as much of an expert, but bear with me. Here we go. The other goal that I wanted to achieve is there's a lot of misinformation online about Madame Alexander, about her company, that has been perpetrated since the Pat Smith books back in the 1960s and 70s. So I want to get started, and I want to make sure I have dates and everything right. Bertha Alexander was born March 9th, 1895 in New York. Her mother's name was Hannah Pepper, who was born in Austria. She came to the United States from Russia, where many Jews, myself, my family included, were escaping from the pogroms of Russia, which were decimating Jewish populations throughout Eastern Europe. Bernice's natural father died when she was very small, and her mother remarried Maurice Alexander, who she adored. So she had several sisters. Now, the first thing I want to debunk to you is that Madame Alexander's father, Maurice, owned the first doll repair company in the United States in New York City, and I was told by some excellent authorities that it may not be true. But he did run a doll hospital in New York where they grew up on the top floor, she and her younger sisters, and she walked around and watched all of the repairs and all of the replacement heads, because of course back in the early 1900s, little girls would take their bisque dolls outside and bam, then they had to get a new head and a new replacement or a new body or a lot of other myriad things. So Madame Alexander's sisters and herself grew up in this household, and they watched the poverty on the Lower East Side and a lot of the poor immigrants, and it made an effect on Madame Alexander. Madame Alexander's mother, Hannah, wanted the girls to grow up in a better situation. So they were encouraged to, Pat Smith that said that she was an effervescent and very bright and very energetic child. So I'll go with Pat because Pat has some amazing Madame Alexander books out there. So she grew up, she graduated high school, she married her longtime boyfriend. His name was okay, I can't find it now.
Well, he's not that important in this story.
No, he's not that important in this story, but we do want to get his name right because he became a partner in the business. So she married her husband. She took a course in bookkeeping, and her husband worked at a haberdashery, I think. Now, again, we've got information. This is from the Jewish Women's Archive, where Madame Alexander was listed as an Eshes Chayil, or a woman of valor. So they said that the husband she married him. They had 2 children. My understanding was a son who died from the Spanish flu, and a daughter named Mildred in 1917 who was born. So she had her 2 children. She and her husband, she began seeing in World War I, there was a stop to making those bisque-headed dolls and bringing them in from Germany. And now this is where the story can get sketchy, is that she and her sisters helped out the family business by creating cloth dolls. And my understanding was, it was a Red Cross nurse, and my understanding was the timing was great. The nurse was very, very successful. So they made this wonderful doll. She and her sisters, my understanding. It was relatively successful, and she began to see there's a future in this. There's something that she can do. Madame Alexander, one of her greatest assets was her style, her ability to interpret everything around her, the beauty, the glamour, and create dolls. She was exacting, and in 1923, she began with a $1,600 loan, and again, she goes to the bank, or she goes, and they see a woman there. So the understanding was she knew how to talk to them, and even though she was just a mere woman, and she got a loan. And 1923, the Madame Alexander Doll Company is born. And at first, it was a rough ride, figuring out a woman in business. She hired her husband, who worked alongside, Philip Berman. He worked alongside of her until his death in 1966. And he did the other side of it. She did the creativity. And she began creating dolls. And I believe F.A.O. Schwartz began to catch on to some of the beautiful things that she was creating. And she first started out, and I want to see there they are, with cloth dolls. Because there wasn't a lot to be making these dolls of. These are in exceptional condition. We've got Susie Q and her brother, and their colors are gorgeous and vibrant. And that 1930s on these dolls. And then, of course...
And I have to say, BelleAnne, look at how she pieced together the front of the plaid material to make that beautiful design.
Well, this is the thing that we begin to see. Yeah. In the inception is the dolls were just a vehicle for the creativity and the clothing that these dolls had. And they were everything was truly exceptional. You know, the hems, there's nothing wrong. The bright colors, everything about this doll was beautiful and appealing.
Yes, I agree with you.
So in the 1930s, Madame Alexander begins to take off. And we see we have a beautiful menorah here, a Hanukkah. We see the composition dolls that she's created. Here's BelleAnne. This is a 1930s example with a swivel waist, sort of very kind of thin and lovely, and a beautiful toy for a child, because that's who these were really for. She's tagged. Most of her items were tagged. So she had a lot of pride in everything.
How did she manage to survive the 1930s?
Well, she managed to
survive.
When so
many people didn't.
That's right. She managed to not only survive, but begin to thrive, because she began to understand the idea of tying in. Don't forget, we see in 1934, Shirley Temple, and she missed out on that wonderful doll. But she saw, well, there's some other characters that I can recreate for the public and for the children. So she had, of course, the Dion, let me get out of the way, the beautiful, gorgeous Dion quintuplets, and those were a tremendous success. It was, of course, very, very rare in Canada.
It was a cultural phenomenon.
It was a cultural phenomenon during the time of Shirley Temple that these children were actually put on display. I mean, I would like to say like zoo animals, but I'm not far off the mark here.
You're not.
And they were taken away from their parents, and Dr. Defoe, I think, was in charge of them, and she actually made a doll of him as well. And they capitalized everything. You go from maple syrup, from Karo syrup to Jell-O. Everything had these dolls, the figures of these beautiful little French Canadian children on them. So she began to have tie-ins. There were tons and tons of things that she did. The 1930s was a period of her finding her niche.
But don't you think that is just so ahead of her time?
Oh, it really was.
Yeah.
She did dolls off of books. She did dolls from Gone with the Wind. She did
And I believe that she snagged Gone with the Wind before the movie was made.
You've got to have some vision.
Yeah.
That's right. And she did, of course, Jane Withers, and she did Margaret O'Brien. So what Ideal did with Shirley Temple, she began finding other creations during the 1930s that she could work with, and they were just gorgeous. Here, this one, Madeleine Dubin, or Madeline, and let me see if we can.
We'll lose
I wanted to take her out because this human hair wig composition doll. She's very small. This is probably 14 inches, 13 inches.
But look at that print.
Look at the print.
I mean, that is a beautiful.
And like I say, again, the doll, it's a little Wendy face, and the vehicle, look at the beautiful, it's a hoop skirt with, look at this, with metal in it so that it stands out.
And beautiful shading.
Yes.
Do we know who did the actual designing of her sculpts? Is there any?
I don't think I personally have that information, but it is an excellent question, and I highly recommend everybody go to the Madame Alexander Doll Collectors site. They have a club, the Doll Collectors, and I'll show you after the show because they know, they are experts of the experts.
Yeah,
and
you're a fangirl, basically.
Yes, I really, I'm convinced, and I'm a fangirl, and they have a huge following, and you can go to their website online and you can see talks about this doll and that doll and Sissy. And
so tell me about these little wee things.
Oh, aren't those darling? Tiny Betty. And this is at a time when all of a sudden becoming popular are all of these little international dolls. And this becomes a big, huge seller for her. Not just this doll, but in later years. But this one...
Isn't it that little young woman out in California kind of changing with the storybook dolls?
Oh, yes, Nancy Ann's storybook.
Mm-hmm.
So Madame Alexander sees, let's see, I think this is is this Priscilla or yeah. Let's see, Priscilla. So here she is, a little pilgrim-like girl with her little Bible. And she's really beautiful. And again, the doll is kind of okay and simple, but you've got this wonderful finished outfit.
And it's very intense.
Yes.
I mean, an apron, a fichu.
And this says a lot to people. Mm-hmm. This would be a wonderful doll, a first christening doll, anything like that. So here's the other little tiny Betty that we have. Here we is. But everything, look at, again, we're looking at the clothing. Mm-hmm. And this is all made in New York City. Composition doll, 1930s, mohair wig, beautiful materials.
I know that in my lifetime, a doll from Madame Alexander Company made in New York City.
Yes.
This was just...
it was magical. Mm-hmm. You had to go when, in fact, as a small child, I never heard of them because you had to be a child of some means. And Mama would go to Bergdorf Goodman, as I think that, or Macy's, or she would have
Saks Fifth Avenue.
Saks Fifth Avenue, and then they would have them at Christmas time, and
Macy's.
they would be, yes, and they would be behind, a place where the lady would talk to you and show you each doll and tell you it's...
And they didn't have a lot.
They did not have a lot, and
In
they
my
were...
time,
Yeah, this was not something, you did not find these at Woolworth's.
No.
These were absolutely high-end dolls, and we see why. So these are two little, these are composition, and they are in such beautiful condition. Identified, thank you, Madame Alexander Doll Club and Madame Alexander groups on Facebook for identifying these dolls, flirty eyes, and she's quite large and substantial.
Don't they feel good when you hold them?
Well, you know, that was one of the things, one of her favorites, and to this day, the company still has the baby line, and they're absolutely, look at the, you know, they're just beautiful. And this one was early 1930s vintage. She liked using the name Little Genius, so this was one of the...
I think you could call those big geniuses, because they're pretty big.
Yes, yes, Baby Genius, and this one was the blue-eyed version.
I think it's kind of unusual to have a pair of twins. Do you see that often in a set of Alexander's twins?
That is not really unusual. And these are unusual, and their condition is really astonishing. Because there was another one that we found in the shop, and that one just, you know, a child really played hard with it. They loved it. But these little girls, these little dollies, they were put away. They were made, you know, or played with occasionally, or we really...
Well, they were Madame Alexander dolls. So
they were Madame Alexander dolls. Absolutely. So, we leave 1947, post-war. Things change with the introduction of plastic. And that began to change everything for the Madame Alexander Doll Company. Molds were switched over. You had a lot more crisp and bright colors when you used hard plastic on the dolls. And things began in the company. I would consider from the 1940s into the 1950s, in my personal opinion, the golden age of Madame Alexander, who did, by the way, come up with the name Madame herself. And I also have another aside, and this is from my dear Ann Coleman, so I want to give a shout out to her, and her recollection that Madame Alexander really very carefully controlled her image and controlled the press. So she made sure that anything that was printed about Madame Alexander and the Doll Company was primo information. And pretty soon, that is all you saw in the 1950s about Madame Beatrice Alexander. So she really curated this wonderful image.
She had a brand.
She had a brand. She was a brand, and she had a brand. Mm-hmm. And when you look back in the archives and you see all the beautiful stuff, I mean, the 50s were an explosion.
Shall we look at something from the 50s?
Absolutely. We've got, of course, we've already seen, thank you World Doll Day celebration, the Sissies.
And if they haven't, they should go look at that.
Oh, if you have not,
because
yeah.
That's really...
Absolutely.
And it may not be on the World Doll Day site now, but they could go to the YouTube and go look up Michael Canadas and BelleAnne Curry and Sissy, and you'll see. But she wasn't in the show, so.
Right. This is we have a beautiful new Sissy that was acquired by the Grovian.
From the original owner.
Yeah, from the original owner, who lovingly protected this doll. And when this first came out on the market, the buyers, the men, were saying, no, this is not a good idea for little girls to be playing with. And this is 4 or 5 years before Barbie. And all of a sudden, you've got this little buxom young woman, you know, beautifully.
She's sweet, though.
Beautifully made. Look at this gorgeous outfit when we turn her around, the zipper in the back going, oh my God, all the way. Look at this. The work, the heels, you know.
Yeah, it's spectacular.
She's just
And I don't know that she ever had clothes.
No, this is an original, she came like this in a basic outfit, so Madame Alexander could sell you dresses and hose and shoes and extras. And, you know, of course, Kylie Rue Shaw's books, show a lot of the incredible outfits that were available at that time. So for Christmas you could get the doll in an outfit, for Easter you're going to get another outfit, and pretty soon your doll had a better wardrobe than your mother.
So clearly the male toy buyers didn't know what
they were scared. They were scared. They wanted to make money. But
and what was the price point at the time?
I think that these things back in that time were under $10.
That was a lot of money.
But that was 1955. That was a lot.
That was big money.
That was a lot of money. These were not Miss Revlon, there was a lot of knockoffs and a lot of other types, and little girls could really throw those around. Well, this one, you didn't.
No,
this
was your special doll.
Very, very, very top end. So along with her, we see next to her Sisette. We don't have Elise here, but we have a lovely Sisette, which is...
Yeah, we don't have, we couldn't possibly have everything.
You cannot? There's no way.
No.
But of course the Sisette, there's wonderful books written about Sisette. She's a beautiful example.
And look at the sculpt on that and the paint.
Yeah.
And the mechanism of the eyes. It's
I
really
love when
well
you can
done.
tilt them back a little bit. I mean, what dolls now, what does this?
None.
What dolls do what she does? And
the
everything, of course,
hair.
the quintessential squared snaps that were a wonderful way of saying, oh yeah, this could be a Madame Alexander outfit. Of course, we know that this one is. And then wonderful, I don't think these are her particular, I think these shoes go to this other doll. But what the heck, they're gonna work today.
Well, she's wearing them today.
She's wearing them today because, well, she's just beautiful. So back in the 50s, of course, to me that was prime time for many gorgeous and amazing outfits. And this is where I want to also say, I don't have the time to tell everybody all of the amazing awards that Madame Alexander received for her dolls and her design and her image. So that's another thing.
But I think we should put a shout out to the fact that she was the largest employer in New York City.
She moved to Harlem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And she was very involved in the welfare of her staff.
Yes.
Their life.
She was very involved. She was an excellent employer. She was very demanding. They said that she would walk up and down in the room when the women were working, and you're going to redo this hem. It doesn't look right, because she wanted these when they hit the floor to be primo. So.
And they all knew that.
Right.
But I believe she helped out a lot of ladies when they were in trouble.
Yes, she
and
did.
getting them in the right direction.
Yes.
And so for that, not many employers do that.
That's right.
So.
And the building was in Harlem, and from my understanding, she was one of the largest employers in that area.
I believe she was.
And she did train a lot of these women when they came in, and she turned them into artisans so that they could put out these gorgeous and amazing products.
Should we look at the children of the 50s?
I love the little Wendykins, Alexanderkins, the name would change. I'm going to show you this one first because, like there's a #1 Barbie, this is the #1 Wendy. And she was a heavy body, hard plastic.
Is that straight legs?
Straight legs. They did not have the bent legs yet. I think this little outfit is later, but it is indeed tagged Madame Alexander.
It's very pretty.
But she's a very pretty example, and I call that #1 Wendy.
So, but isn't Wendy named after her granddaughter, I believe?
That I have not heard.
I thought it was named after her granddaughter.
I'm going to go with it because I don't know.
A deceased
I don't have
granddaughter, because
yeah.
it's isn't it? You don't name in Jewish culture.
Well, you do not name in Jewish culture. In Ashkenazic culture, in Sephardim, it's a different story, but the Ashkenazim do not name their babies after those people that are living.
Right.
You know why? You know the story? When the angel of death comes down to get Joe, they might get baby Joe instead of Grandpa Joe.
Oh, right.
So it's what they call a minhag, and a minhag meaning it's a tradition.
Right.
So you don't ask
But
questions.
I do believe Wendy Ann's named after.
I did not know that, but if we find,
Oh
if
my
you
God, I taught you something.
that, oh,
Maybe.
honey,
Let
you
me
can
know.
teach me.
Maybe,
You can
maybe
teach
we'll
me.
find out. I could be wrong.
Well, you know
They'll
what?
let
too?
us know in the
Yeah,
comments.
please let us know in the comments, because I'm going to tell you what. Like I say, the Madame Alexander Doll Club. I can't tout them enough. They will let us know, because we do have to be careful about the debunking, and I want to make this as true as I possibly can. I was talking about the Madame Alexander Doll Company in 20 minutes. So here we have another one. Another little Alexanderkin. She's, let's see here. Yep.
Oh, it's a walker.
She's Bethany Walker in the later 50s. But wouldn't this just have been charming for a little child to get this?
Absolutely.
And of course, I believe Pat Smith wrote a beautiful book about these little Wendykins and identifies a lot of their outfits.
Now, do you think that she was following the market trend of the Jenny doll?
Absolutely.
Yes. So this was her.
This was her answer to Ginny.
Yeah, I can do
Ginny,
this too.
Muffy, Alexanderkin, they were all available. So we'll take this one.
Except she's still standing and they're all gone.
Yeah, she's still, yeah, that's right. Even the Vogue Doll Company, I think, is not working right now. So we have some more of the little early dolls. I love this one because she has black eyes.
Oh, yes.
And another, of course.
Beautiful coloring.
Beautiful, gorgeous coloring.
And I hope someone in the Alexander world would let us know who did the sculpt. I mean,
that's the thing we don't see. You know, it was like somebody said that Bernard Lipfert did the sculpt on Sissy, but I asked an authority who said, we don't have the information. We don't know. So the sculpt that they did is just, it's knockout gorgeous. Look at the beautiful doll that they made.
And she was really at the forefront of using all of the latest materials that became available after the war.
With no expense spared. You've got not one, not two, you've got 3 rows of rickrack.
The rickrack is not the problem, it's the sewing it on.
It's the sewing it on.
And particularly that edge around the collar is difficult.
That's right. So we have a lot of
BelleAnne,
these
I
beautiful
noticed that we
Wendykins.
have somebody who should not have a Disney princess in her hand. So it looks like we've got
Eloise!
But it looks like we've got a Disney princess.
There's a beautiful Disney princess because Madame Alexander was very, very smart in having tie-ins to Disney. So this is Sleeping Beauty, which was a different sculpt than Sissy.
Oh, yeah.
There, it's
I
a
guess
different.
I always thought it was the same, but
no,
it's
ma'am.
not.
No, sir. It's a different sculpt.
The face is much narrower on the...
Yeah, and then you've got the different painting, the thick lips. She does not have, no, I don't think she has bent knees, and she has flat feet, so she wears her little outfit.
So was Sleeping Beauty a tie-in to the movie when the movie came out, or was this a Disneyland item?
This was a Disneyland item because you could go to Disneyland back in the 1960s and you could buy an exclusive from Madame Alexander.
Because I remember we went in 1970 and I remember the shops that had the Madame Alexanders and they were just so beautiful.
Yes. And that,
so
this is an exquisite.
She had a relationship with Walt Disney.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. She certainly did. And I think she used to at one point in Florida at Disney World, gave a talk or two, and the tickets sold out to hundreds and hundreds of people to get a glimpse of the beautiful and wonderful and amazing Madame Alexander.
So I noticed something that I'm intrigued with. We have a doll of color here.
Yeah, well, this is
is
yes.
this a African American Wendy? What's going on here?
Okay, so this is Belle's cheat sheet. So I wanted to tell people, Madame Vogue made a black doll for the children, a black 8-inch doll. Madame Alexander surprisingly did not. She made other African American dolls. Cynthia comes to mind. But she did not make a black Wendy, which ticked me off a little bit.
But maybe she just didn't recognize the market, that there was a market there.
Apparently, I don't know.
She didn't recognize Shirley, so
that's
people
right. We can only speculate. So I fixed things. I went to a doll show and I saw a Thailand for sale, an early bent knee, and I saw I saw Thailand for sale.
And that's the great thing about Madame Alexander's. They fall down and it's just fine.
That's all right. They're plastic. They should be okay. And I said, what a great way to show off an extra dress for the kid. Or if you happen...
So, that's what you did.
Yeah, and I swapped out the dress. So I took off all of the lovely Thailand, which was beautiful. And now we just have a lovely...
I think this is more fun than a Thailand.
I think it's a lot of fun. And for those that are collectors that collect black dolls, or want to give one to a grandchild. I think it's just a super way to do so because there's so many people, so many dolls on the market now, so many Madame Alexander, and the price point of a lot of these 8-inch dolls are fabulous.
Yeah, it's the time to collect.
Great
so tell
time
me
to buy.
I noticed that you picked this up off the floor. So what is...
Oh, I hope you make a copy for everybody. I want you to do that.
So tell me what this is.
This is 1950s.
It's a dream book.
That's right. It's a little dream book for the children. Dolls Are Little People by Madame Alexander. So it talks about all of the outfits and Wendy and Aunt Pitty Pat. And this is 1959, 1960s. And of course, Little Women. This was Louisa May Alcott's book was one of the biggest sellers for Madame Alexander. And for years and years and years, she made different variations. There's people that only collect the Little Women dolls. She made them in the 40s in hard plastic and large sizes. She made Lissy.
Well, that would fill up this whole building.
It would fill the whole building with all of the different variations of these 8-inch dolls. And then, of course, all of these wonderful little outfits. So this is a great dream book for children, and I'm hoping you make...
I think that when you look at all these books, each photograph has to represent many thousands of units.
Yes.
Because you're not going to have toy shops order it and they don't have it. So,
right.
I mean, and I would imagine she was probably very involved in the imagery of all of that, wasn't she?
Absolutely. Absolutely part of the image. And that's a perfect way of talking about this. This is a dream book for the kids.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. So we move off from the golden era of Alexander. Beatrice is getting older. She kind of wants to retire from the company. Her husband is 1966. He's passed away. And she still wants to keep things fresh and different. So she's experimenting a little bit. And this is one of my personal favorite dolls. This is Coco. And what I love about Coco, she has a beautiful face. Now, I have to tell you this ain't her original dress. She came in one of these portrait dresses that was, a little girl had played heavily with it and it was not in very good condition. So I put her in this dress. This is she did not sit. She had a swivel waist, mid-1960s vintage, but there was just something really extra special, like that girl, which she did make that girl back in the early 1960s, that kind of a face. So I wanted to...
Well, you're playing, and I think that there are dolls out there that could and should be played with.
Right.
You're playing with this.
I kind of am, yeah.
You think you're a curator, but you're actually playing.
I'm playing. 66 years old.
And do you know what that makeup style is called?
What is that style?
It's called the flick. When it has that eyeliner that goes up to the little point. That's called the flick.
The flick.
I learned that from Joan Collins.
Oh my gosh. To me there's a little bit of a Streisand thing that's going on.
She did the flick too.
She did the flick. That was all the rage in the 1960s. But this, I just love Coco. I think it's just a beautiful, here, I'll put her in.
Now, I noticed you brought something from your collection that was their answer to that pesky doll.
Pesky, okay,
that thing that came out in 1959 and just rocked the
what was
world.
that thing? I forgot the name of that. Oh yes, Barbie. So Madame Alexander noticed Barbie. So she came out with, this is Brenda Starr, She's very sweet. And she had different outfits. Now, what I loved, and there are collectors, there's aficionados who love Brenda Starr.
Well, the illustrations are fantastic.
Yeah, the illustrations are absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
But the doll, go
Barbie
ahead, Michael.
Barbie didn't have to worry too much. She just didn't.
Barbie did not have to worry, but it's still lovely.
I think it has to do with, please don't hate me out there on the internet. It has to do, I think, with the hairstyle. If they would have done a more interesting hairstyle.
Well, yeah, look at the beauty, look at this.
Well, the illustrations work, but does it really work in life?
Right.
You know? That's an awkward hairstyle for anybody.
Yeah, it's sort of, it's just sort of, she was a little, as we say, a little nebbish. The doll, she was a little bissel and nebbish, so.
But she had to respond to Barbie.
Right, well,
maybe it didn't work.
And not everything is going to be, a fabulous thing. You experiment, and sometimes it's, oh, heck.
Yeah. And we have to sometimes remember to stay in our lane, realize what works for us doesn't work for.
Right.
So we went from the 60s.
Right. And the later years of Alexander's, and I'm going to tell you, it becomes a situation that there's not loads and loads and loads on the inner, but I'm going to show you a difference here between, let's take, say, this one or this one. And then here's, someone has redressed this. St. Louis. This apparently is not a real, but you've got this, and then you've got what's going on with the company. Mm-hmm. Things are changing. Things are kind of going down. This is a later example, and it's lacking. Mm-hmm. You know, the bloom is off the rose, so to speak.
But don't you, BelleAnne, I don't think that the consumer today is as discerning as they were in 1950.
This is probably a good point.
So in order to get the perfection of the 50s, the price point would be out of reach.
Right.
Even for the upper end.
That's correct.
Clientele.
That's right.
So I think they're just responding to what's happening.
This is fair to say that. Absolutely. You're right about that. But that's why it's an absolutely gorgeous era, because people could do this. And they could do this, what I call American ingenuity, made by talented people in the United States.
And then we have their answer to, they missed out in the 50s.
Yes.
On this quintessential New York girl.
Yes, Eloise.
And again, they outlasted Holly Toy Company, and then they snagged the rights to Eloise.
That's right, which is such a charming children's book. And another, there it is, tying into...
There's lots of places they could sell it. They could sell it at New York shops, they could sell it at the plaza, but I think that it's a really, really bad idea to give Eloise a Disney princess.
Yeah, I know it. I'm afraid it's going to be going down the sliding down the banister now, isn't it?
Yes.
But what a charming book for kids, and what a great doll for children to play with.
And I will say too, the quality of Eloise is top notch.
Yes.
I mean, they're I think much more beautiful than the originals, and we have a few of the originals in the building, but I do love this the Biggins Eloise here.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
In conclusion,
yes,
BelleAnne, tell me what for you, what this company means to you as a collector and a child.
I think that it represents the best of who we are. I get off our clamped because it represents the beauty in humanity, the gorgeous costumes. It's a great teaching tool for children, how mama dresses and how to do
and
things.
Literature.
Yes.
children's literature.
And all of the children, that's it. It's like, go get the book. What is this? Who's this goofy little girl? Well, the book is tremendous.
It's genius,
for these
I
kids.
think.
So there's just, it means a lot to me, and it's a great source of pride. It's a Jewish woman done good.
She did.
So I also want to give a final shout out at the end of my conclusion, because the company's still going on. They are still selling things at the Madame Alexander the Doll Club. They still, if you can go online today and you can take a look, they're selling a lot of beautiful baby dolls and other items. So they kept going. Let's see, it is now owned. It was sold to Con Lucas Lancaster, sold the company to Hong Kong City Toys. They're still in, and I would like to give a shout out to Anne Connell Bergen, who found this information and gave me the cautionary tale not to believe everything I'm reading on the internet.
Yeah. Well, thank you, BelleAnne. It was a very enjoyable program for me. And thank you for bringing all your wonderful treasures to share with everybody on World Doll Day.
Thank you, and I appreciate everybody's comments and thumbs up and all the nice things that you're saying about everyone. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button.